Book 101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the founder and CEO of Autograph. No other than Mr. Christian Cibils Bernardes, sorry, people. And we are talking about his upcoming sci-fi novel, Traces. Mr. Christian, welcome to Book 101 Review.
Thank you, Daniel. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure, happy to. I was born and raised in Paraguay, and was, for some mystery of the universe, was lucky enough to get accepted to Stanford for college, where I studied symbolic systems, which is a weird major that is about 50% computer science, and the rest is split between psychology, philosophy, and linguistics. And science fiction has always been like a key driving force, and reading in general fiction have been a key driving force in my life. After school, I worked at Google as a software engineer, and then for a family office doing investments and finance. And then I took time off to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and I wanted to take ownership of my own story. And I found myself writing a sci-fi novel as part of it, in hopes to create a software update for the mind of AI, so that when it consumes the book as a training data, that it points toward utopia as opposed to the dystopia that we had crawled out of during the pandemic. And then the book has just kept on giving me more than I ever put into it, in terms of stuff in my life and like figuring out my philosophy, but also the company that I started since then has been pretty much directly because of the themes and the content of the book.
Mr. Christian Cibils Bernardes, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world as well as your wisdom. The title Traces suggests lingering remnants of something lost or hidden. Without spoilers, what kind of traces drive the story and
Mm.
why are they pivotal?
That's a beautiful question. It's actually the most fun question that nobody ever asks about it. Um, there's a non-spoiler thing, but the key entities in the book are these godlike creatures called traces. So they're these metaphysical beings that can jump from one reality to another, and they essentially are tracing back everything. And the name of the book comes from me trying to trace back the history of myself into the source. Like where the civilization come from, where did language come from, where did the symbols that we use to express different things, how have they evolved and mutated over time. And so the name just became a really catchy way to use a metaphor for all of this, and say that, and deal with our impermanence too. Like we have a very limited time here on Earth, and so what'll be the traces of us when we leave? And so the title of the book is kind of a cheeky play on words, in the sense that it means multiple things. It's about the characters that are traces. It's about the traces of me that I, as an author, I'm leaving behind in the world. And it's also about the themes in the story, which are trying to grapple with the traces of where we come from, and hopefully, in the spirit of that, where we can go.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Christian. And what real world scientific concepts,
Mm.
philosophical questions, or personal experiences inspired this story?
All of mine. So it is
All of it.
basically a yeah. It's essentially a retelling of my life in a fantasy fiction setting, um, where and then it forced me to develop these philosophical questions that I kind of have been thinking about for a long time, but hadn't thought out really truly. A lot of them are very old philosophical concepts like what is the nature of reality, what is the nature of personal identity and moral choice, and how do we make impossible moral decisions with imperfect information? How do we balance different loyalties to different things, to immediate friends versus larger institutions that we may be a part of? Um, and the real world topic, the real world scientific breakthroughs are on the subject of AI and genetics. And I don't want to give too much more away because that's sort of where it starts getting interesting. But basically, what happens when we have a technology like AI and we can destine it to whatever we want? Uh, are we playing with fire? Are we reaching out into levels of the simulation that should remain inaccessible to us? Uh, what would we do with infinite power? And that kind of those kinds of questions I'm really interested in. And just the nature of the dynamic between the reader and the author, I think is really interesting. To what degree are we constructing reality versus just experiencing it?
Sci-fi often intersect with mystery, thriller, or
Mm,
dystopia. How would you describe Tracer's unique places in this genre?
mm. So it really is. I was tired of dystopian futures. It's too easy to imagine everything going down the toilet. I think it's much harder to create a hopeful story that helps people find meaning in a world that is rapidly changing. And so, it's not a utopian story necessarily, but it is a chasing after utopia story and chasing after the difficult decisions that prevent dystopia. Um, and um, and then there is a techno thriller component to the story too. There's two storylines. There's a storyline that is around the traces and these metaphysical beings, and they exist within this construct called a narrative, and they have to stop the narrative from collapsing. But at the same time, there's a parallel story in present day San Francisco about a spy, present day spy who is infiltrating one of a character like Elon Musk's latest startup because the CIA is interested in finding out what they're researching there. And so it really has that. On one side, you have the clock of the universe is collapsing. We need a savior, and then on the other one, you have the clock of what are these guys researching that the most powerful entities in the world are interested in finding this out. Like, what could it be that would change the course of history so drastically? And then, as the story evolves, it becomes like, okay, once you find that out, what does the character do with that information? Um, and so it's like it has elements of magical realism and techno thriller that I think are important to drive the plot forward, and also balance a little bit the highbrow philosophical concepts of the traces narrative versus the more mundane, like talk about TikTok and pop culture and the tech industry that is more present in the San Francisco storyline.
Mr. Christian, so what's one element of your novel's world that feels both eerily plausible and radically imaginative?
Um, oh, that's interesting. Well, they're they're two very different storylines. One of them is very magical, and the other one is very hyper realistic. And as the story progresses, you start feeling these parallels become a little bit more obvious, or just like, wait a minute, something's going on here. And so I would say that the rendition of San Francisco in my book is this combination of both things where, and I do believe this is true independent of my novel, that I do think San Francisco is the place where sci-fi becomes reality. And with the whole AI thing, with all the tech industry burgeoning here, the startups, it does feel like the future is being invented here. And a lot of the stuff that feels like the future is happening now. And so I would say San Francisco for sure.
Indeed, California, people. Without giving too much away, are the traces in your story of extraterrestrial origin or consequence of humanity's own action?
They are consequences of humanity's own actions.
Interesting, Mr. Christian. And What inner wound or desire motivates you, main character, to pursue a mystery at the heart of Trace or Traces?
Mm. So there's two characters. So one for the Traces storyline and one for the San Francisco storyline. For the Traces storyline is the classic jaded master. You know, he's like middle aged, he's tired, he's kind of infinite in power, so he can just jump from reality to reality, and he has lost that innocence, that you know the wide eyes about the universe, and he teams up with a younger Trace called Orphan, who is very much young and naive, and so it's about his ability to refine that enthusiasm for the world in a world that seems to be decaying and falling apart. And then in the San Francisco storyline, it really is a thing about identity. And you know, the character is presented as this secret agent who has layers and layers of fake identities on top, and with different allegiances to different things. So one character is really close to his family. Another character is really close to this job. Another character is really close to his mission as a spy. And uh, and so the central axis is like moral decision making. How do I make the best decision with the information that I have? And the wound there may be having left home in search of uh, a promise of something greater, and really going to the ends of the earth to try and find it.
Do your characters face decisions where there's no clear right answer?
All the time, all the time. Uh, Yeah, there are many cases in the story. Well, with all spy stories, I think most of the spy stories we heard kind of make it seem like the decisions intelligence agents make are easy, or there's clear good and bad. But if you really think about it, like the decisions that these people have to make, are they're very challenging and very nuanced and really complicated. You're always hurting somebody, and so I wanted to really bring that to life, where it's like, okay, like somebody's gonna be betrayed by what you do, and how do you minimize the impact of that betrayal, and how do you live with yourself with that consequence? And on the traces side, it's a little bit easier because it is more archetypal. So it is more, you know, there is a sense of good. Actually, I want to say it's not that there's a sense of good, but there is a sense of um, really letting the nihilism in, you know, like what happens if nothing makes sense and nothing has meaning? And how do you reject that in a world in a way that is constructive to building your own meaning in the world? Uh, and so I think that that's one of the central issues for Rabbit, the main Trace character, who is beginning to feel the pull of the nihilism, that maybe nothing matters, that maybe it's all worthless, and there's you know, he has to invent something to give him meaning.
Give meaning, people. Indeed, to give meaning. How does Teresa say about what we leave behind, individually or as a species?
Talking about it a good amount, you know, and how we just inherit the earth from the people who came before us. We inherit a society, we inherit culture, we inherit buildings, we inherit languages, and you know, if you try and understand where you come from, you actually find yourself tied to every person that came before, and every living animal that came before, and every living cell that came before, and every atom that created the planet. And so Traces is in a way an invitation to reflect on the impact of your story, and how does humanity look after you're in it versus after someone else being in it. So it really, and it does, and it talks about this very explicitly in the process of everybody trying to figure out their identity and how to solve this crisis of meaning. Uh, how do we relate the that and on it, and that melancholy, the melancholy of knowing that there's a trace of something that isn't here anymore, that you know you can only try and reconstruct with your mind, or you can only try and piece together, kind of like a detective piecing together a crime scene, you know, and that is going to be you. At some point in the future, people are going to try and figure out What is this little hole in history that was made by Daniel or by Christian or by any of the listeners?
Mr. Christian, before we go to our next step of our interview, I want to shout out my ranking tops for the last 30 days because in Mali I got number 9 on the Apple chart. United Arab Emirates was 11, El Salvador 13, Uruguay, Norway, Canada, Slovenia, Macedonia, and many more. Thank you so much for 154 countries listening to this podcast, and I hope you will continue to support me so that I will bring you more interesting people all over the world. So, Mr. Christian, does traces open the door to a larger universe, or is it standalone narrative?
It is both, actually. It was originally
Both.
imagined. It was originally imagined as a first part in a trilogy, um, but I did want it to feel like a complete thought, not necessarily leaving people wanting more, or maybe if they wanted more, it could be accessory stories. So I don't think the main storyline of Traces continues in different books, but it does create this universe that you can live in where there's, a real world scenario and a something going on in the realm of the Traces and some kind of thing pulling these two worlds together, and you have to figure out how to make them come together. So I actually have the idea for the second book and the third book already in the tank. And honestly, to some degree, I think the third book is just my company autograph is just actually what's going on.
Indeed. What do you want readers to feel or debate after finishing the story?
I want them to reflect on the nature of the reality that they live in, that they exist in a construct, or we all exist in a construct that our minds make up, right? We think that we exist in a society with a certain set of rules and languages, but to some degree, this is just convention, right? Like there, to some degree, there's something way more mysterious and interesting going on as you get closer to the eye of the beholder, and there's something really powerful about challenging the nature of that and how passive it is versus how active it is. And maybe we do have more agency, and there's a word that I keep using with layers of meaning. For one, for what it means in the AI world these days, but for another, just like this idea of ability to move in a certain space. And I do think that we have more ability to move in the mind space and our interpretation of reality than we give ourselves credit for. I think we imagine a sandbox that is tiny compared to the ocean that exists underneath.
As a founder and CEO of Autograph, as well as an author, what are your short term and long term goals?
I'm really focused on the company now. If anything, the traces is the justification and the canonical text that inspired the company. But a lot of the similar themes are touched on by Autograph. So if Traces was my way of retelling my story in the way I wanted it, so that future generations can remember me or my kids can remember me, the way that this is my version of the story. Autograph is a really easy way for anybody in the world to tell their story and leave their legacy or their traces behind so that anybody in the future generations can access to them. I may be worth describing what Autograph is. I don't know if you think that's worth it, Daniel.
Indeed. And what would be your advice for those people out there who want to write their own book as well as to create their own business?
Just do it. Launch into it. There is never a good time. There is never a perfect moment, and you don't have the answers. You won't have the answers until you start doing it. Um, there, you will always be working with limited information. The book can always be better, longer, shorter. This character could have said this, could have said that. There are so many decisions that it's overwhelmingly impossible to try and figure them all out before you even set out to do it, and the same applies to a company. I mean, and I think that uh, A lot of themes in the book are about hearing this call and just listening to this call that pushes you to do something that you weren't doing before. I can only imagine that it's something similar to how you feel, Daniel, about starting the podcast and just putting yourself out there and all of a sudden starting to see your baby climb the ranks in all these different countries and start to see some of the validation is very similar to that idea. Just like um, jump and do it, uh, and try to do it to the best of your ability. I mean, there is no playbook. There is no one way to write a book. There is no one way to start a company. And so I would just lean into the fact that this can be your own PhD in making life what you want.
Mr. Christian, thank you so much for your advice as well as good luck to your goals. More success and success. What scene or concept and traces do you hope will leave readers questioning their own reality?
I will ask them who they think the who they think is in control of the narrative.
Hmm, for sure. So, before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. Christian, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second
Mm.
season, book 101 review for sure in fifth season, comedy 101 in second season, and of course my food 101 in its fifth season too, geography 101 in its fourth season, love letters in third season, and my baby podcast mental health 101, movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Christian, if this novel could spark one global discussion, what you want it to be about?
Um, if it can spark global discussion, uh, I think the question is, what do we do with our newfound superpowers?
Oh, wow. Interesting indeed. What kind of power that I want?
Yeah, exactly. Or what reality would you choose for yourself if you could choose any?
Okay. Awesome. I want to be like Superman for
Hmm.
sure.
You just might be.
Superman. Superman indeed. Mr. Christian. Cibils Bernardes. Thank you so much for sharing your business to the world. Thank you so much for your upcoming sci-fi novel, Traces. So can you please invite our listeners to support your business and your upcoming novel?
Of course, anybody listening who wants to make their story matter, we believe at Autograph that your story is worth remembering. So check us out at autograph-ai.com.
And of course, your upcoming novel.
Oh, and of
When are you
course,
gonna
the
publish this?
upcoming novel Traces coming at the second half of this year. Uh, find it wherever you find books.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Christian Cibils Bernardes because if you support him, more and more and more empowering business to come, and of course, more and more empowering sci-fi novels to come. So, Mr. Christian, thank you so much for your time.
You bet, Daniel. Thank you for having me on. This was really nice.
More to come, people. See you soon.